And joining me now is Laura Sanko. Laura, first of all, congratulations on making your debut as a UFC commentator. You've had a couple of days to mull it over and let it all sink in. So how's it all been going?
It's been a phenomenal week. I mean, it's been a very hectic week, if I'm being honest, but man, I'm still on cloud nine. The flight home last night was probably the first time I was able to really decompress and kind of let it all sink in. And then I was, going through my Instagram and saw Conor McGregor call me iconic. And I was like, okay, now how am I even living in this life right now? This is crazy.
Well, that's awesome. And let's talk a little bit about that. How has the feedback been?
It's been great. If I'm being perfectly honest, I haven't been delving too deep into it because I just don't find that to be super helpful. I kind of stay at the surface level, but the people that matter, the people in the UFC, the people that make these decisions, and certainly they loved it. And it went very, very well. And the other, the feedback I really appreciate probably the most, if I'm being honest, is from the fighters and female fighters in particular. I mean, so many female fighters on the roster have just been great. And, a lot of them saying, thank you for showing me, a potential career path when I'm done with fighting. So that means the world.
Absolutely. And it really is what it is. It's breaking glass ceilings, and it is showing that there is a route here, for females. But I know you have mentioned multiple times that it isn't all about that, that you are just a serious broadcaster and commentator. So talk about that moment when you found out that you were going to get this opportunity.
Well, I've actually known about this since September. So I didn't have a specific date, but this had been kind of put into place at the end, toward the end of last season of Contender Series. I was in a hotel room. I'm in hotel rooms a lot. And my boss called and just said, hey, we sat down with Dana and the rest of the executives that make these types of decisions. And we're going to bump you up, and, congratulations. Get ready to go. So it was just a matter of this particular card made a lot of sense for my first one. I will be doing, this is now my new thing. I'm no longer a reporter. But this card made a lot of sense because it was the RTU Road to UFC finale. So it was a good spot for me to take off.
Yeah. It was all meant to be, wasn't it?
Yeah. It felt very serendipitous.
And how do you prepare? Because I know, working in broadcast myself, there's a lot of preparation that goes into these gigs. But I think when you're thinking about the UFC and the amount of hours that is required for talking and knowing fighters and, knowing their history and knowing their stuff, how much preparation went into your debut?
For the debut, I was lucky to have so much, advance warning. And I think I got the date maybe at the very beginning of January. So I had a long time to think about it. And when I have a long time to think about it, I'm just going to do more. So for this one, I added it up. I did about 3 hours per fighter. And my process is, the bulk of it is watching film. I want to give the fighter justice, not just their most recent fight, but I love seeing the evolution of a fighter over a longer period of time, and especially the guys that are coming in, and certainly the participants in the Road to UFC finale, understanding what they looked like, before they got to this sort of new level, because a lot of them had only been fighting in their country. And like, for instance, Anshul Jubli had only had fights in India, which isn't, a big MMA scene. So it was interesting to see him really level up when he came to this, bigger moment. And then on top of that, I study their social media and kind of see what they're up to. And the very last thing I do is I sit back and I think about of course I'm thinking about the stylistic matchup the entire time, but, things that always apply, for instance, Southpaw versus Orthodox, what are some of the things that we always have to be thinking about when that is the situation? So it's a lot. It's just been my answer. That was a really long answer. A lot.
Well, it is a lot, but it's not like you don't have experience in it. Not only, you mentioned working the Contender Series, the Dana White Contender Series, but you were a former fighter yourself. You know what fight camps are about. You know what sparring is about, and preparing for these big moments. So how much has that really, created a foundation for you in the work that you're doing now?
That's been huge. I mean, I certainly don't have the longest career, but being in the game, I think, is really where I've earned my stripes. I started training in 2006 when particularly women in MMA, it wasn't that there weren't any. We had Chris Cyborg to look to, we had Gina Carano to look to, but they were not anywhere close to being in the UFC. So it really was MMA. Women's MMA was still a very nascent sport. It's interesting because it's not that you can't be a good analyst without any fight experience, but it definitely goes a long way. And for me in particular, it is what allowed me to jump lanes from being a reporter or a host or someone that kind of lives on that side of the lane versus an analyst or a color commentator. That fight experience was tremendously helpful. And I think it certainly gives me a lot of rapport with the fighters. Even though I don't have a ton of fights, they know I know what it's like to cut weight. They know I know what it's like to be knocked out. I know the feeling of winning a fight. I know the feeling of losing a fight. So it's very important to what I'm doing now.
Did it help in terms of, and I know this might sound a bit horrible, but in terms of being a woman, being a beautiful woman in a place like the UFC, to come into this job with that respect there already because of that experience?
Oh, for sure. And I think part of that too is how you approach it. I think spending, the last, gosh, I hate adding it up, like 17 years in an MMA gym. When I started there, I was the only girl for a very long time. There's lots of women on our team now, but you learn how to be appreciated for being a female, but also blend in and just be one of the guys. It's kind of an interesting balance to achieve. But because I was so used to that dynamic, finding my place among the male broadcasters that were color commentators or analysts it was pretty easy for me because, that's just kind of, I just want to be one of the guys. And I think they were I think at first they were a little shocked because a lot of people, of course, they wouldn't know that I fought, obviously. And maybe I don't look like the typical MMA fighter. Not that there is a look of a typical female MMA fighter. I actually hate it when people say that, but it is a perception that's out there. So there was, I think there were some surprising moments, but it didn't take long for me to earn the respect, and I wanted to earn it and not demand it. So that's how I went about it.
You talk about sitting next to other commentators. One of them you've had a lot of experience sitting next to is Michael Bisping, former UFC middleweight champion. What is that relationship like? Man, he can talk. And so is there an art to, perhaps injecting yourself in those moments when you have someone like Michael who is there sitting right next to you?
Yeah, he's a big personality. He's got a big voice. All of those things. I love Michael. In fact, Michael's probably one of my favorite people. And every person I've called fights with, the only person I haven't had a chance to work with is Dominic Cruz and of course Joe Rogan, which that's a long way in the future if it ever happens. But I'd love to be able to work with Dominic at some point. And Paul, DC, and Mike each have their own style, and so being well aware that I'm below them in the pecking order and quite happy to be so. It really is on me to, I think, alter my style to sort of not help, but better be cohesive with theirs, right? So with Mike, he's, like I said, big personality, big voice, and he's got a lot to say. So it's on me to figure out when I can interject things that are meaningful, and when I don't need to talk. I don't need to be talking the entire time. So I'm happy to find that balance with him, and he and I have a lot of fun. I'll say that. Like, the stuff that doesn't make it to broadcast, like when we're pushing our cough buttons, which means we're muted to the world and we're muted to our producers, and we pull that's where the really funny stuff happens. We're constantly giving each other shit.
You need to be a fly on the wall for those moments.
Yeah. I actually told him, this is funny, no one else knows this. I told him I would pay him. I said, I will literally Venmo you $1,000 during the show if somehow you work into the broadcast, you tell me to go make you a sandwich. Just because he loves playing into that character a little bit, of, I'm the man here, you're new here, and I don't care. I love it because I love Michael. So I was like, I dare you. I just dare you to tell me to make you a sandwich.
Well, there was actually a food reference that you made in the broadcast about the Goldilocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually stood out for me. And then I can't remember if it was Michael who asked you for a definition of what that term was, but can you explain it to us?
I was referring to, gosh, no, I'm forgetting who it was. I think it was Devin Clark. No, it wasn't Devin Clark. Da-Un Jung. He's got to find, that's who it was. He's got to find the perfect balance of aggression and being a little bit more calculated and fighting a little bit more of a counter style. So I was just kind of describing how one fight, he went a little bit too far one way. Another fight, he went a little bit too far one way. So, you just got to find that middle road, that Goldilocks. My porridge is not too hot. It's not too cold. It's just right.
I thought that was gold. I was like, oh, well,
thank you.
Great.
I made a baking reference one time on Contender Series when I was calling it with Mike, and he was just like, "Can we please not bring baking into fighting, Laura?" Like, no, I'm bringing all the baking analogies.
This is my style. Talk to us a little bit about, we're going back a little bit, but you finished your fighting career, because I watched your little UFC documentary, the little introduction to you, and about stopping fighting to become a mum, and having your family. And I know, a few years have passed since then now, but talk to us about that balance. I'm a mother myself. There are, many other mothers who are broadcasters who want to find that fine balance between, raising a family as best as they can and pursuing their dream.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's a dance, and really every day is a dance. And I couldn't do it without my husband being a great dance partner with me. And we have a nanny who helps a lot as well. So it's a constant moving ship, because my husband owns a company. He travels some. So it's a lot of logistical organization. And my son is great as well. I mean, I think the thing that really has made the difference for me in the past few years, when my workload has really sort of started to increase, and I get that mom guilt every time I leave, and I can tell he's a little bit sad, or I know that I might be missing something that I really don't want to be missing. He's so good about, he's really emotionally attuned, and he'll just give me the greatest pep talks. It's amazing to get a pep talk from a 9-year-old, but he'll say, Mom, it's okay that you're going. I know you're going to be back in a couple of days, and what you're doing is awesome, and you're going to do great, and it's important. And Dad and I are fine without you, and we're going to have fun. And don't be too fine without me is usually what I say. But no, it's definitely I couldn't do it without my husband.
Yeah, because I know that there's a lot of conversations around. And I don't want to sound horrible, but by men in particular, with your debut, talking about, being the woman, being the woman. But for me, it was being the mum, having the family and all that. I just thought to myself, you can already see from the outside how demanding an organization like the UFC must be, let alone trying to balance all these external things. And these just are the realities, one part of when you are a woman. So kudos to you. You give the rest of us hope.
It's a lot of juggling. Yeah. And there are definitely a lot of times where you feel like you're not giving your all to either side of the fence, but that's just sort of, that's part of it, and you do your best. You do your best. You stay present with your kids when you are with them. And then when you're not, you dial right back into, whatever's right in front of you. That's how I approach it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great idea. So what happens for you from here on in? When can we expect to see you next?
Yeah, it's crazy. So I originally was supposed to have my next colors, because we usually know a couple months out what our schedule is. And my next spot was going to be sometime in April, but then one of the other commentators had a schedule conflict, so they actually moved me to 2 weeks from now.
Oh, wow.
What was going to be the Sandhagen Vera card is now the Blanchfield Santos card. So I'll be calling that one. I'm not sure who I'm calling it with, but regardless, it'll be fun.
That's awesome. It's just great to see that all your hard work is coming to fruition. And we say that over and over again, all of your hard work and years of it. And again, thank you so much for joining us on UFC on Sky. And again, congratulations. We can't wait to see you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.